This is the last stream of the year, and I don't know if we're sad or happy. And we will talk about brandoms, fandoms, Taylor Swift, and other cool things with Georgie.
Yes.
We are today to co-host because it's like early morning for us, like 11:57.
And Vika is working, so this is why we we don't have her today. So
meaning that
she has
you
a
can
job.
introduce yourself like twice.
Yes.
Heavily, I know.
Yes. So we will have like a brief introduction before we start, so you know at least who we are. I'm Lara. I'm a community manager. I'm designer. I'm a producer, and I do a lot of stuff actually. And it will take half of podcast to just tell what I'm doing in my life.
And you're forcing this podcast to be exactly 30 minutes because you're too lazy to edit more.
Yes.
But people don't listen more anyway. And look,
who are you?
Oh, look, I'm a second or third co-host of this show. Yeah, I do tech. And I used to be involved in parasocial relationships. That's what we're gonna talk about today. Let me actually start from that. Like,
let's maybe start from introduction of our guest.
Oh yeah, I guess.
Why
yeah,
you're
sure.
so lost? Hi, Georgie. Can you briefly tell about yourself? What are you doing?
Yeah. So hi guys, I'm Georgie. I have just started a new role as a strategy and community manager. But I also am getting my PhD in sociology, where I study fandom communities and how they kind of function as an ecosystem. So that's pretty fun too.
Yes, I want to talk about this so much, seriously, because I'm wondering, I will go straight ahead. I'm wondering, because I see that a lot of people are in fandoms, and I open my Twitter, it's full of fandoms, they're in some BTS, K-pop stars fandoms, somebody and somebody else. But I've never been in any fandoms, really participated.
Supernatural?
I mean, I was fan of it, but I wasn't in fandom because it's a bit different things. I didn't bring anything to the people.
Wouldn't you join whatever social networks that you were using when you were a kid or a teen, to argue about something?
No. So I'm wondering, is it normal thing? Is it how does it work? Why human brain works like this, that they want to join each other in fandoms and they want to bring something to the fandom, like art or fan fiction or something like this?
It's just an extension of other forms of community. It's just about a shared love of something and wanting to connect with other people who also love the thing. So basically the difference between a fan and somebody who's in a fandom is just belonging to that community and having the relationship with other fans. And so I've been in fandoms most of my life, and I've been studying fandoms for the past 5 years as well. And it's really just about that connection, and you want to share things because it excites other people. You might be just talking with your friends and an idea blooms. You might want to give something back to people that have supported you. And it's just a really reciprocal relationship and kind of social sphere in which you've got this object that's at the center, and that might be Taylor Swift or Supernatural or whatever it may be. And then you love it, and then you find other people who love it, and then that's what excites you. You found these other people who you're like, oh, I'm not alone. Somebody else loves it as much as me, or somebody else wants to talk about it with me, and nobody in my real life does. So it's just really an extension on other forms of community, but instead of bonding over maybe your job or another sort of interest, it's over a media object.
But I have a question also. So for example, I understand. Kind of understand how it's to be a fan of some Marvel movies or Supernatural, some piece of art. I understand, you can be a fan of this, but what about being a fan of some person? Because I feel it's so weird because the person is a public figure, and he shows or she shows just public himself or herself in front of people, but you don't really know who is he in real life.
But even when we meet people who know us only from podcasts in real life, and they talk to us like friends, with context, it scares the fuck out of us.
The question is for example, how can you be a fan of person whom you don't really know? You don't know his real personality. You how does it work? Are you a fan of the art that he or she is making, or are you a fan
the virtual image of that person that you created
or something that you imagine about this person? How does it work? Because I don't understand.
layers involved here, and it really depends on what celebrity it is. Like, for instance, my research is into Taylor Swift fans, and there's like even 2 layers within that. One is people who are fans of her music, and you listen to her music and you're like, oh wow, like this is a fun song, or oh wow, like she's singing about this heartbreak. I also had my heart broken when I was that age, or I also, you know, had this same experience. And then she constructs herself, like her whole persona is designed to make you want to be her friend. And it's how she gets you to spend money on her. And that's what a lot of celebrities do. They make themselves seem friendly and like you can get in touch with them, and like if you just did bump into them in the street, maybe they would fall in love with you, or maybe they would become your best friend. And it's a way to get you to keep spending money. It's a marketing tactic. But as fans, you kind of see it, and, you know, sometimes you can't explain it. You're just like, oh yeah, like I just really like this person, and you know that they're a celebrity and what you're seeing isn't real, but it's a bit of just like fantasy. It's a bit of, especially when you're growing up, it's a bit of just like a safe, like romanticizing. It's helping you like develop your own personality. A lot of the time when we hear about parasocial relationships, people talk about it in quite negative ways, and they talk about fans as, you know, as stalkers or taking it to extremes, and that it's weird and unhealthy. And in the very extremes, that's true. But for 99% of people, these parasocial relationships are really just healthy, normal parts of their social lives, and more than actually thinking they know the person, because most of us will never come into contact with the person we're a fan of. But it's more just a way to talk to your friends, and it's kind of like a form of like a glue, a gossip glue, so you can talk about Taylor Swift like you know her. Like my friends and I at work last week were talking about Jake Gyllenhaal and Taylor Swift's relationship like they were people we knew. Obviously we don't, but it's a way to bond with other people. And it does get murkier when you meet the celebrity, and that's part of my research. I research fan celebrity meet and greets, and that is where the line can get a bit more blurred. But for the most part, it's just kind of seeing a celebrity and kind of seeing parts of yourself reflected, or seeing things you might be attracted to reflected. And it's just a way to kind of be like, oh, like that person seems cool, and then they reflect back to you because they want your money. So it's also a bit, it's a way to get you to...
But for example, like, I don't know, I'm coming to Twitter. I don't know why I have so a lot of teenage girls there. And they're like, oh my God, this actor, like guy actor, we're literally in love with him. And I'm like, is it even healthy? Because how can you be in love with person? Like in love, obviously it's not like that love.
You have been a teenage girl too.
Yeah,
but you relate to this, like, or like you hate everybody
cannot,
since
no,
like since your childhood.
Because like, for example, in my mind, it was very clear, like this person, I will never meet him. I don't know him at all, because like he's just showing the side of himself that he wants to show. It's not the real him. So like, how can be in love with that kind of person? But like I see that a lot of, I mean, I'm saying girls because I'm following only girls, so this is why I have that kind of very strange relationships, and I'm wondering if is it even healthy?
It's very healthy. It's something that a lot of people do. Like you look back at, you know, the 60s and the 70s with the Beatles and the way teen girls responded there. Girls often are framed as being like it being hysterical and unhealthy, the way they react to, you know, male celebrities. But like when I was a teenager, I was so in love with the Jonas Brothers. Like I was convinced that I was going to marry Nick. Like I knew I wasn't, but my friends and I just loved them so much. And then One Direction. And like even as I study these celebrities and I fully understand these relationships from an academic perspective, like the other day when I started my new job, I had to fill out a questionnaire, and one of the questions was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I answered, like, I want to be married to Harry Styles. Like, you know, I'm almost like, I know it's not real, but there's that part of you that's like, yeah, well, if I did just meet him. And I think that's just part of our human brain. Like, unless somebody takes it a step too far and does begin like stalking someone or taking it to an unhealthy level, which
but for
I'm not going to say
example,
never happens.
But like, is it healthy? For example, I'm in love with Harry Styles, for example, and I don't want to like even look at other guys because, oh my God, you're not Harry Styles.
Who's Harry Styles?
The fuck? I Google out like during the podcast, like if you're, yeah, continue talking.
Yeah, no, it is healthy. Because for most people, it's a part of kind of like, especially when you're a teenager and you're kind of coming to terms with your own like sexuality and your own development and your own sense of self. it's kind of just like a safe way to understand attraction. Very few people will actually, like maybe when you're like 15, you'll be like, oh, I'm never going to marry anybody else. But by the time you're like at an actual age where you're like looking to enter real relationships, most of us understand. Like I have friends who are like, in their 40s and 50s who are still like super in love with whatever celebrity, but it's a different part of your personality. It's like how men will cry over sports teams, even though they know it's a sports team. Like girls who cry over Harry Styles, even like me when you're, almost 30, it's that same part of your brain. Nothing's going to come from it, but it's just that irrational emotional part. And for most of us, it's just a bit of harmless fun. And for 99.999% of people, it's never going to be a problem.
But is it like parasocial relationships are good like at all? Because like, for example, there are a lot of examples. We talked with our previous co-host about this. So some people are complaining like, I'm paying to this blogger and he's not giving me that kind of attention as a friend as I want, but he shows himself as my friend. So like, and this blogger is also kind of confused because he's not supposed to be a friend with some random person who is just paying.
You're talking about OnlyFans.
I mean, for example.
Yeah, like...
Is it like even good? Because like that's the first person is delusional that like this like celebrity is his friend, and like the second person is feeling not okay because this person is delusional. So like it's kind of
especially in the OnlyFans case, like it can be quite let's say it intimate.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, and I think that is where now we are seeing that kind of change where it's not so much the far-off celebrity and the fan, it's that much closer creator-fan relationship. That's not, like, I haven't done research onto that myself, so I can't talk to that as clearly, and that is where it gets a lot more complicated. And I know that there are lots of people who are researching, like, platforms like OnlyFans and Twitch, because it is that more one-on-one, you are a lot closer in degrees of separation. And I think that's where like the power, like community moderation and all of those kind of roles become so important to make sure that that distance is maintained in a way that the relationship it still exists and the person feels like they belong, but not in a way where they feel like they have unwarranted access. And I think that's kind of the really complicated space where we're in at the moment, as all of these technologies and platforms are still in development and we're still figuring out how they're all growing. That kind of really awkward space. But yeah, that is where the parasocial relationships can become quite complicated. Not so much when you're in love with Harry Styles or Taylor Swift, but when it's the person you pay on Patreon or the person you subscribe to on Twitch or on OnlyFans or whatever. And that is, that's the grey area where it's the smaller scale creator, but where it has a lot more potential for like for the creator to feel affected by it and for the fan to have more power as well towards that creator.
I'm super curious about like your researching how does this all work, but I was allowed to ask this question towards the end of the podcast, so like I'm keeping this question till I am allowed. But can we dive deeper into the Taylor Swift phenomenon again, since I understand like that's the focus of your research, and why is everybody like... What I mean, I just hear and I see comment to geek out about Taylor Swift, about like perfect, I know, community manager or fan manager. It's like she's doing something special, and I don't understand why. What's so special about Taylor Swift, and not any other pop star?
Few layers here, and I've actually again been having this conversation a lot in the last few weeks since she re-released Red, and from my own personal experience as well, it kind of helps to begin there because I became a fan of Taylor in 2008, 2009 when I was 14. And you feel like you're growing up alongside her because, I think she's like 5 years older than me, but that's not that much of a difference. So, she has a song called 15 and you listen to it just before you turn 15. And then she sings about being in high school and the friends. And then she sings about being 22 and falling in love. And it feels like you're growing up at the same time as her and she's singing all of your feelings. And when, especially you're a teenage girl, you have a lot of feelings. And then for her to make herself accessible to her fans. So she's always done this thing where you can't buy a meet and greet with her, but she can hand pick you from social media. And if she hand picks you, like you'll get invited to her house. or you'll get invited to like a special party backstage with her, and it's like being the top tier of a Taylor Swift fan. And you can only get that by showing that you're like her biggest fan and you'll do anything for her, and then you get noticed. And that is how she kind of sucks you in. You want to be noticed by her more than anything. And so you buy all of the things, you go to all of the concerts, you do whatever it takes, because you think if she just notices me, you know, she buys people handmade, like personalized presents and writes them these long letters. She makes them think like she is their friend, all to get them to keep spending money. And it works. She has a marketing Twitter account called Taylor Nation, which is her marketing team, like spotting fans and like engaging with the fans. And to even be noticed by them, it's like the biggest badge of honor. They'll do anything and they'll put it in their Twitter bio, like noticed by Taylor Nation on this date, invited to a secret session on this date. Like the way she does that, and it's all to do with that feeling like that she's been there through your whole life. Like, you know, I don't talk to most people I knew when I was 14, but Taylor Swift is still there. It's that kind of crazy. And like, it's pretty hard to replicate that because nobody else has really done that consistently for 15, 16 years. And that's part of the reason I chose her as my case study. And my other case study is actually Supernatural, because it also was around for the same period of time. So it's kind of these long relationships you have with these media objects, and it's asking what makes it so special even after all of this time.
But I'm listening to you and it feels like exploitation of fans, like really.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about this. Georgie said in the beginning that this is just one of the ways of marketing, just like using friendship. It is what it is.
And that's part of what I talked about in my thesis. It's like, you know, it is at the end of the day exploitation. She's exploiting her fans, but the way she does it makes them feel like they're not being exploited. And that's the phenomenon I've always been really interested in, because it's the same in the Supernatural fandom. You have to pay thousands of, like hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars to meet the actors. But the fans don't feel like, for the most part, they're being ripped off by that, because it's such an honor to be in that person's presence. And it's such an interesting way that they framed that. But again, it goes back to, I always tie it back to being a sports fan. You know, like grown men cry when their team finally wins a cup or a final or whatever after a million years, or they cry when their team doesn't. They riot when it doesn't. And it's the same idea of just like feeling so connected to something for no particular reason, and knowing that you're spending your money for something that doesn't love you back, but kind of not caring anyway. And there's no real explanation for why this happens on like a societal level. Like some people tie it to religion and like modernization and things, but it's just like we just love to love things, and if we spend the money, I don't know. I don't have an explanation for it, but it's super interesting.
I'm listening to you, and then like Liara, we actually do the same thing to our fans. Like we hang out with them in the chat, like with the paid fans. Like we have dedicated hidden channels only for the paid fans, and like so sort of people paid to get closer to us and to hang out with us on live too. So like, yeah, are you exploiting our friends? Oh, fans. How do you feel?
No, we talked about this in the previous episode. So if somebody's wondering, they can watch previous episode.
Okay, right.
But I still like, can you explain a bit the difference between fandom and brandom? Because before, like we had this conversation, I was like, okay, this is logical. But right now, I like when you explained about Taylor Swift, she's a brand also. Like she is a brand. So is she's fandom or brandom in this case?
So that's something it's an argument I've come to in my thesis, is that she's a brandom. And the difference is, for me, a fandom. So say you love the show Supernatural, and Supernatural might be in the heart of your fandom, but what's most important is the friendships you've made and the community you've found. And so you can take Supernatural away, but those bonds will still be there. But for fans of Taylor Swift, some of them will have that connection with other fans, and that might be important, but you take Taylor Swift away and then it all falls apart, because paying attention to her, giving her money to buy merchandise, new albums, everything, hearing from her is what's at the heart of it. And so that's where the brand is controlling the fans still. And so there's an illusion of fandom there, because the fans, you know, exist and there is that community, but they're being asked to participate in marketing activities all of the time. Whereas in a real fandom, outside of a brand, you can take that brand away, but the fans will still be writing fan fiction. They'll still be going to, conventions. They'll be making fan art for each other. They'll have conversations about the show or about the music or about the book, but that doesn't give that object any money or attention if they don't want to. So that's like, it's like, it's two different things. You have to ask whether the object, the brand, is at the heart of the community or whether the people are at the heart and they just happen to have bonded over the thing.
I still don't quite understand the difference between Taylor Swift and Supernatural because, like, okay, if we will take Supernatural away, people, why they would still have connection?
And I'm thinking about, like, Beatles. They sort of faded off, like, long ago, and people don't geek out around Beatles, or maybe they do, but, like, in a different way. So
yeah, so a lot of so I guess it's easiest if we think about Supernatural. When the show ended, a lot of fans got really, really angry at the show, but they didn't leave the fandom. They didn't want to engage with that part of the show, but they wanted to keep their friends and their ships and the fic and the art they'd created. They wanted to stay in the world, but they didn't like the official object anymore, or they thought they felt let down by that. So they wanted to still exist in the world of Supernatural, but they didn't necessarily want to rewatch that season or give them money or only engage towards, say, the Supernatural official Twitter account. They were existing in their own closed spaces with their friends and communities. Whereas Taylor Swift fans, a lot of them are just tweeting at Taylor. They're just trying to get noticed by her on TikTok. They're just trying to tweet at Taylor Nation. And they might have their friends, but their primary activity is towards her rather than towards each other because she has conditioned them.
What about Britney Spears then?
It gets complicated because a lot of these terms as well are still like fluid and not many people are exploring them. But with Britney Spears, it's kind of a different sort of community again because it's almost its own unique case because she was doing the opposite of exploitation. The fans, like she was so helpless that the fans were choosing to go towards her and were, uniting as a fan base to help her. Whereas, Taylor Swift putting out her 10th, lot of merchandise in a year is a very different situation. So there's simplifying it down to brandoms and fandoms is like very simplified. There's a lot of other things happening, but it kind of comes down to how the fans don't see themselves as exploited, but it's basically how important is being like giving your money to the official object and being recognized by that object versus the relationships with other fans. Maybe like a lot of them will have Discord servers and will, have group chats and things that, the friendships were made, say, through Supernatural. But now, like, they might still write fic and talk and do all that kind of stuff, but watching the show is by the side. Like, I'll watch it occasionally, but it's more about, like, the friendships and the community they've made rather than continuing to, we must watch Supernatural all the time, we must go to the convention, we must do this.
Oh my god, people are so complicated. Alec, this is 5 minutes left. You can ask your questions.
I'm trying.
5 minutes.
Yeah, so I'm eventually allowed to ask about your research and what does it mean, like being a researcher and like your PhD. Can you talk a bit more about that? Like, why are you doing this and what happens after that? And like how? Yeah, like just let's geek out on your research.
Yeah, so I'm coming towards the end of the 4th year of my PhD. So my thesis is due in the next 6 months or so. And I'm in the Department of Sociology. And so my research has involved, I did surveys with 600 fans, and then I did in-depth interviews with 13 of them. And I've been looking at, how fans spend money is basically my main interest in how that changes their place in hierarchies. And like, are you considered a more popular fan if you can spend more? And my day-to-day life as a researcher has changed over the years just because I now also work full-time. But it involved a lot of, data analysis, a lot of, reading theory, a lot of writing theory. It's kind of like studying anything else except, you know, you're reading theory about boy bands, or you're reading about supernatural / fic, or the interviews you're transcribing are about, you know, how much somebody loves Taylor Swift. So it's a pretty like fun area of research, and it's not something a lot of people do. There's a niche world of fan studies and celebrity studies, but generally there's not a lot of us at, like, you won't find multiple of us at most universities. So you kind of have to find your communities on Twitter and at conferences and things. And as for what I'm doing afterwards, that's the big question. There's no future really in academia at the moment. So I have just started a new role. I worked for 6 years as a publicist. And in my last role, I kind of was getting more involved with our community management. And so I've just started a new role in an agency focusing on community management and strategy. And I think that's something that I'm really interested in, seeing how that I can use my research skills and my passion for community in that. Ideally, I'd love to do it more in the fandom world. But again, especially in Australia, very niche career area. So I'm just kind of, seeing what happens. And step one is finishing the thesis, and then we'll see come next.
That's actually a very good question. How can you apply the results of your research to your job as a community manager?
Yeah, more than anything, it's just allowed me to, I think, develop a really good understanding of what people are looking for. Like, obviously you can't apply it to every community, but what people are looking for in the community and what sort of relationships they value and the relationship they have to the brand or the object or whatever it is that has drawn them into the community. And I think as well at the moment, as we especially talk about tokenized communities and Web3 and all the paid gatekeeping entries, I think what my research, and like, you know, this is, people have very strong opinions about this, but what my research and my position allows me to kind of see is that we need to be so careful of who we're leaving out, and that, maybe you think it's really cool to have your token to your Web3 community cost all of this money and it's super exclusive, but then why do you want a community that's exclusive, that's that exclusive? Why are you trying to gatekeep? Like, what about all of these other people? Isn't there value on what they can bring? So I'm very interested in the socioeconomics of it all, and how we see people as people that, and maybe money shouldn't be the only thing that we're putting up as a way to access.
And all the crypto dudes listening to this podcast are now, we should hire Georgie to help us build the Ponzi scene. Like, she seems to know how to do that. So crypto dudes, like, go away. Go away from here. Yes.
Yeah, that's Alex, thank you very much for your very smart and interesting questions, but it's already like almost 30 minutes past, so I have to finish the show. It was very interesting to know, because like I'm still digesting, I still like trying to understand completely about this all the differences between communities, fandoms, brandoms, and so on and so on.
And also, I mean, it's so cool that, like, a bit think about like this show of ours. Like, we started talking about Discord and how to use Discord, and we're ending the year like geeking out on ephemeral things about fandoms and communities. So,
I think it's very interesting. It's still like human interactions. It's about people, and community is about people.
And so many fandoms are now on Discord and are using Discord channels to have their community exist, again, outside of the official object. They exist on their own little servers with just their fandom friends. So it's very relevant.
Thank you very much, Georgie. It was very interesting to discuss. I'm still will digest for a week probably all the things that you said. So yeah, it was very interesting. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.